disease, meningococemia. One of the complications that we watch out for, again, will be adrenal hemorrhage and subsequent adrenal insufficiency. You may have infiltrative diseases, metastatic lesions, even your adenoma, amyloidosis, sarcoidosis, but these are more common in the older population. And drugs. So all of these may subsequently cause your primary insufficiency. So for secondary adrenal insufficiency, the defect now lies on the pituitary or the hypothalamus. So here, you would have a low cortisol level, but because even if the cortisol level is low, there is no stimulation or there is no release of your corticotropin releasing hormone, and subsequently no ACTH production by the pituitary. So both ACTH and your cholesterol here would be low. And these are some of the causes of secondary adrenal insufficiency. Again, many of these would be genetic in nature. Very, actually rare conditions naman siya. And what they call tertiary causes of adrenal insufficiency. So, flashed here would be the frequency of the etiologies of primary adrenal insufficiency. So as you can see, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, frequency is 59%, followed by the autoimmune disease. So if you add all of them together, it would be still above 70%. But as we mentioned, adrenal hyperplasia, congenital adrenal hyperplasia is most commonly seen during infancy, and your autoimmune diseases later on in childhood and the adolescent age years. And the other lesser causes of primary adrenal insufficiency. Okay, so clinical manifestations and biochemical findings of adrenal insufficiency. These are just the symptoms and the pathophysiologic mechanism behind it. What is probably causing this? If you have, if you can still remember the video, ano ba yung mga manifestations ng glucocorticoid deficiency? Clinical manifestation is already repeated here. You have fatigue, anorexia, you have weight loss, you have nausea, vomiting, you have, was mentioned there also, abdominal pain, your joint pain, myalgia, your low blood pressure, skin pigmentation. These are all part of the glucocorticoid. And for the mineralocorticoid, you will have salt craving because there is decrease in your serum sodium level. You may have a patient who is dehydrated, so with low blood pressure as well, and even be tachycardic because of that. And laboratory-wise, for sodium, potassium, these are mineralocorticoid manifestations, and hypoglycemia, ketosis, low random cortisol level, eosinophilia, lymphocytosis, high ACTH. These are all glucocorticoid deficiency manifestations or pathophysiology. And high plasma renin activity, of course, mineralocorticoid yan. So this is the proposed diagnostic criteria for autoimmune Addison's disease. And there are 5 criteria here. Based on this criteria, they say that if you are able to satisfy 1, 2, 3, and 4, then you have a definitive diagnosis. And if you only satisfy 1, 2, 4, and 5, then you have a probable diagnosis. So, what are these conditions? So, you need to go in to look at the basal cortisol level and ACTH level and see how high or how low they are. It satisfies number 1. Then you look into the adrenal gland volume. So you need imaging here, like your CT scan and MRI. So usually calcifications may be revealed through your X-ray, simple X-ray, abdominal X-ray, or a CT scan. Number 3 is anti-cortex, adrenal antibodies, or high titers of anti-21 hydroxylase antibodies. So this would now tell you definitely, this will document the presence of your auto-antibodies supporting your autoimmune disease. And 4 would be the exclusion of other causes of primary adrenal insufficiency, like genetic conditions. And if it is a genetic problem, we all know that most of the time they would have some form of dysmorphic feature that will give you a clue that you're dealing with a genetic condition. You look for say your problems of adrenal leukodystrophy by documenting very low, very long chain fatty acids, and rule out infectious diseases that causes adrenal insufficiency. Like in our country, what is more common would be your tuberculosis, and the use of drugs that may be suppressing or counteracting your corticosteroid or cortisol, like your ketoconazole. And number 5 would be other concomitant autoimmune conditions, like your Hashimoto's or your Graves' disease. Kasi pareho naman siyang autoimmune. And as what we have learned, most probably more related to Graves' disease, because Graves is multi-organ as compared to your Hashimoto's that is localized only to the thyroid. So again, definitive if you are able to satisfy 1 to 4, and probable if you do not have any antibody titer determination, but you are able to satisfy 1, 2, 4, and 5, then you have a probable diagnosis of autoimmune Addison's disease. So this is just an algorithm for the diagnostic approach to a patient with primary adrenal insufficiency. So you merely have to follow the arrow where it points you. Just for example, if you are suspecting a primary adrenal disease, and this is an infant, look at the enzyme, 17-hydroxylase progesterone, because that will also tell you if your 21-hydroxylase progesterone is deficient or not. So if it is positive, then you might be dealing with congenital adrenal hyperplasia. If it is negative, look for the genetic syndromes, and we have enumerated so many of them. So if this is primary adrenal insufficiency and they are more than 6 months, look for 21-hydroxylase antibody. So you're looking into the autoimmune disease in this case. So if it is present, then of course that points you to an autoimmune adrenal insufficiency. If not, then look at the very long chain fatty acid. If it is a male, then probably you have adrenal leukodystrophy. And if it is negative, you have to do a CT scan of the adrenals. It may be a hemorrhage, infection, tumor, or an infiltrative disease causing your adrenal insufficiency. Okay, so workup and for these patients and treatment. You have to remember all the functions of your hormones here to be able to predict or to be able to have an intelligent decision of what laboratory examinations you need to request. Of course, we would have to determine if this is say primary or secondary type of adrenal insufficiency, and this is where your ACTH, cortisol level would come in. If you have a deficiency of other hormones like your mineralocorticoid, then you look into your renin and aldosterone, and then go into some of the function. We've mentioned eosinophilia, lymphocytosis in glucocorticoid deficiency, your serum electrolytes, particularly your sodium, potassium, but also remember calcium. So it may not be mentioned mostly in this case, but you know that calcium has something to do with calcium metabolism. So you need to look into calcium levels as well. And your BUN creatinine. Why would that be? Adrenals yung pinag-uusapan natin. But the BUN and creatinine would be important. This is because if you're dealing with adrenal insufficiency, what would be the manifestation? Low blood pressure, hypertension, or shock. So, even if this is merely pre-renal, hindi pa siya outright shock, compensated shock pa lang siya, then your creatinine may be normal, but your BUN may already be starting to increase because of the dehydration your patient is having. So that is very important to ask also. Then your imaging, CT scan, X-ray, and your ECG. Bakit ECG? Ano ang magiging manifestation ng mga problema sa what particular thing that I have been mentioning a while ago that will cause changes in your ECG? Not only the hypotension and the shock, no, of course, magkakaroon ng changes yun. You're looking also for arrhythmia formation, especially for, in this case, kung hypoaldosteronism siya, what will happen to your potassium? What happens to potassium? it will increase. So you run the risk of hyperkalemia. So you need to look for ECG changes that would uh, give you a clue that you have to act and treat the hyperkalemia. Ano ba yung mga clues na yun? The earliest would be a tall peak T wave. That would be the earliest. Kung nag-arrhythmia ka na, mag-arrhythmia ka na rin. Matakot ka na rin. Because that is, it might be an impending end of your patient. The patient is already in arrhythmia. So you do not act during those times. You act before the arrhythmia formation. And there are ways by which we can treat the hyperkalemia. I think this was discussed. Gusto kayo ng nephrology, di ba? Na-discuss na sa inyo ways of how to treat your patient due to hyperkalemia. Enumerated here are some of them. You can give your intrarectal Kayexalate. This is by a retention enema. It actually it's an exchange resin that will pull your potassium out of the body through the rectal mucosa. And ano siya, no? Exchange resin siya. So it's actually would exchange sodium for potassium intrarectal. So you're now giving potassium to the sodium to the patient and removing potassium. You can also give your calcium gluconate. IV calcium here is usually in the form of IV calcium gluconate. What it does is to stabilize the heart. So if you are impending arrhythmia already, this is one of the emergency maneuvers that we do for hyperkalemic conditions. Bicarbonate and IV glucose and insulin combination. How does this act? How will that treat your hyperkalemia? What happens to potassium? Saan siya pupunta? Intracellular, correct. So the IV bicarbonate and glucose insulin combination will drive your potassium inside the cell. Inside the cell, potassium is safe kasi intracellular potassium. It's where it is dangerous when it is extracellular, and we know we can monitor the extracellular potassium by inferring through our serum potassium level. So, next question is, if you put the potassium inside the cell, what happens to your total body potassium? Nothing. Remains the same. Bumaba yung serum potassium mo, pumunta lang naman sa loob ng cell. So, the total body potassium is still the same. What will decrease your total potassium here? Total body potassium in the different modalities that we've mentioned. Dalawa na lang pag-iusapan. Kasi sinabi na natin dun sa bicarb at saka glucose insulin pareho. What about calcium and intrarectal Kayexalate? Which of the two will decrease total body potassium? In Kayexalate, you're actually removing potassium. What about the calcium? What happens to your serum potassium level when you make use of potassium? I mean calcium. Anong action? Ano bang, to be able to answer that, you need to know how it acts or counteracts the toxicity of hyperkalemia. It doesn't do anything with your potassium. If your serum potassium is, let's say, 6.5, and then you gave calcium gluconate, it remains 6.5. What it does is to stabilize the heart. It's actually going back to physiology again and look at the cardiac action potential. You actually would just be resetting the threshold potential of the cardiac muscle for an excitation when you give your calcium gluconate. Okay. So bumalik tayo doon. Fluid replacement. These patients would be dehydrated. We'll go into that siguro later as to how we could replace fluid. So, and that is for the mineralocorticoid side treatment. And for the glucocorticoid deficiency, then you give your hydrocortisone. And there are recommended doses here based on the age of your patient. Since deficient din ang mineralocorticoid mo, the one that will take the action of your aldosterone would be your fludrocortisone. So dalawa yung bibigay mo. If this is a total problem as far as your adrenal hormones are concerned, you give your hydrocortisone replacement and your mineralocorticoid replacement by your fludrocortisone. So yung sex hormone deficiency, again, what sex would be most affected? Female. Bakit? Ba't hindi naapektuhan ng males? O males? Ba't hindi kayo maapektuhan? Because the primary source of androgens or testosterone for males would be the testicles. Wala yun sa female. You only rely on your adrenals and some other areas, pero very minimal naman as compared to males. That's why in congenital adrenal hyperplasia, part of the clue there would be the presence of ambiguous genitalia. So if you have a baby born with ambiguous genitalia, on top of your mind, you should already be thinking of congenital adrenal hyperplasia. So kasama na kaagad sa differentials yun. And that is why kung female yun, na may congenital adrenal hyperplasia, there is some form of virilization that will be seen. Okay, part of the problem that was also discussed in the video would be your adrenal crisis. And this is a severe life-threatening condition, and the acute status of severe cortisol and or aldosterone deficiency. 6 to 8% of cases annually, or 4 to 6 adrenal crises per 100 patient years. This is a true medical endocrine emergency. And substantial mortality rate is 0.5 per 100 patient years. What do you understand by 100 patient years? Yung patient years kasi would be a measure of the total time the patient is observed. So 100 patients observed in 1 year. And of the 100 patients that was observed in 1 year, having adrenal insufficiency, 4 to 6 of them would go to adrenal crisis. Okay? And 0.5, pero wala namang 0.5 person no? Hindi naman natin na mahati katawan natin na 0.5. So, in practical terms, this is 1 in 100 patient years. So, meaning, doon sa nagkaroon ng adrenal crisis na 4 to 6, isa doon, mamamatay. So parang mortality rate mo dyan, case mortality rate mo, 1/4, which is about 25% case mortality rate. So there is rapid deterioration without timely intervention resulting in fatal outcomes. And this can either be happening at home or shortly after hospital admission. So if you have an adrenal insufficiency, we always would have to be on the watch for an adrenal crisis. So major etiologies of adrenal crisis: gastrointestinal and flu-like illness, bacterial, myocardial, fungal, parasitic, or viral infections, trauma, pregnancy, childbirth, surgery exposure in extreme hot or cold weather or other stressful situation, significant emotional stress, strenuous physical activity. If you're going to summarize all these major etiology in one word, ano yun? Increase stress. Lahat yan stress to the body. So anything that would give stress to your patient, tapos may adrenal insufficiency siya, well, watch out for adrenal crisis. It may not be too far behind. Andiyan na siya. So, in any of the stressful conditions, infection, disease, even physiologic, kasi pregnancy is physiologic, childbirth is physiologic, they are still stressors. Other causes, pwedeng cause ng adrenal crisis would be non-adherence to glucocorticoid replacement therapy. So patient education here is very, very important. You have to advise them or educate them that it is dangerous to abruptly stop taking medication. Thyrotoxicosis, because this would accelerate cortisol metabolism. So as use of thyroid treatment, anti-adrenal medications, including methotrexate, metylapone, and ketoconazole, anti-cancer medications. So these may also be conditions that will give rise to adrenal crisis. Unknown history of adrenal insufficiency or previous adrenal crisis. So I've been repeating, adrenal crisis should always be in your mind if you are already dealing with a patient with adrenal insufficiency. So lahat yan, basta meron siyang diagnosis na adrenal insufficiency. Bear in mind adrenal crisis situations. Those who are taking in glucocorticoids, adrenal crisis due to potential suppression of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and medications including your thyroid hormones, phenytoin, phenobarbital, rifampicin, carbazepines, St. John's wort. I had to look this up. Hindi ko alam kung ano yung Jane intro. Ano ba yung Jane St. John's wort? Kulak-kulak pala yan. But it ano parang it counteracts and accelerates the breakdown of your glucocorticoids. Adrenal crisis factors in these are your anticoagulation agents, which can increase the risk of adrenal hemorrhage, additional medications including your megestrol acetate and methoxyprogesterone, pregnancy, particularly during the third trimester, advanced age, so kasama na kami dito, presence of comorbidities, patients with type 1 diabetes, adrenal metastasis or adrenal hemorrhage, and your polyglandular autoimmune syndromes 1 and 2. So, adrenal crisis usually would have these non-specific symptoms. You may have fatigue, weakness, nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, back pain, diarrhea, dizziness, hypotension, and syncope. That quickly progress to obtundation, metabolic encephalopathy, and shock. So the manifestations are all due to your parang cortisol deficiency, severe cortisol deficiency. But there is a rapid progression to obtundation, metabolic encephalopathy, and shock. PE findings, they are visibly unwell, temperature is high, tachycardic, there is orthostatic hypotension, hyperpigmentation, scarring, Cushingoid spasms. These are this would be present. You have to separate the first two lines. So for patients who are not taking any exogenous steroids. Dito sa Cushing's spasms, these are patients who are already taking steroids. Naka-chronic steroids na siya, kaya meron siyang Cushingoid signs like facial fullness or moon phases, your dorso-cervical fat pulp, or what we usually describe as your buffalo hump, truncal obesity with striae, hirsutism, and those with taking chronic steroids. They have abdominal symptoms that features an acute abdomen, circulatory collapse with cyanosis, shock, and eventual coma and death if not treated. So evaluation, of course, serum chemistry, the electrolytes, complete blood count, especially if they have some form of infection, cortisol level, ACTH, aldosteronin, and thyroid function test. So classic laboratory findings, say hyponatremia resulting from mineralocorticoid deficiency. Again, hyperkalemia from mineralocorticoid insufficiency. Your hypoglycemia, your low or low normal ACTH levels observed in secondary adrenal insufficiency, high or high normal ACTH levels observed in primary adrenal insufficiency, hypercalcemia resulting from hypovolemia with increased 135 vitamin D or bone metabolism alterations. So all of these manifestations would be secondary to your mineralocorticoid and your glucocorticoid insufficiency. So classic laboratory findings, you may see elevated creatinine levels, high renin levels, increased urinary sodium loss and reduced blood volume, normocytic pneumochromic anemia, lymphocytosis, eosinophilia, resulting from glucocorticoid deficiency and increased TSH levels. So, the emergent management of adrenal crisis is divided into two. So, two-pronged ang treatment for adrenal crisis. The first is to give a stress dose of your hydrocortisone. So, a stress dose is initially calculated as 50 to 100 milligrams per meter squared of the suggested treatment in body surface area. So this is a very high dose steroid actually. In the discussion of nephrotic syndrome, we mentioned that we give 60 milligrams per meter squared per day. So this is more or less at that level, a high dose steroid. And then this is followed by an additional 50 to 100 milligrams per meter squared over the next 24 hours, administered either IV or IM, divided into equal doses every 6 hours. So 4 equal doses in 24 hours. Or it can be given as a continuous infusion. So first part of treatment would be giving hydrocortisone stress dose. The second part would be your fluid resuscitation. So how do we do this? You give your normal saline bolus at 20 ml per kilo body weight. In the discussion of hindi ko pala discuss sa inyo yung diabetic ketoacidosis, but it is part of the management of fluid resuscitation. You can give an initial dose of 20 ml per kilo, and you give it in 30 minutes to 1 hour as a fast infusion. After that, you actually would have to monitor your patient if they respond. If they respond, what happens? So this is a patient who is already probably hypotensive or in shock. So your vital signs, again, would be very important. So you monitor for your vital signs and see if there would be improvement of your patient. If there is no improvement, then you can repeat the dose. And repeat the dose up until you reach 60 ml per kilogram. So ano ibig sabihin nun? Di mo naman i-repeat ng walang limit. So you can initially give 20, and then if the patient does not improve, you repeat and give another 20. So that's already a total of 40 ml per kilo. If the patient is still not improving, you can repeat it for the third time, give another 20. That would be the 60 ml per kilo. Okay? So usually we would stop there because by that time, if the patient has not improved with the vital signs, the assumption is by giving 60 ml per kilo, you have sufficiently given enough fluid to resuscitate the intravenous compartment. And further giving more fluid to this patient would already be dangerous because you might already induce an increase in intravascular volume, and the patient goes into congestion and pulmonary edema and heart failure. So that would be the limit, 60 ml per kilo. If hypoglycemia is present, you add a dextrose containing solution at the dose of 0.5 to 1 gram per kilo. So these are the recommended, based on age, the recommended dose for your hydrocortisone uh, and your fluorocortisone for this patient, depending upon the age of your patient. So merong hydrocortisone bolus, hydrocortisone maintenance here, and then your fluorocortisone. Fluorocortisone of 0.05 to 0.2 milligrams per day for the mineralocorticoid deficiency. So our cortisone or cortisol replacement, kumbaga, the recommended would be hydrocortisone. But these are alternative parenteral glucocorticoids that you can use. You can give your prednisone, you can give your methylprednisone, and last, and the least preferred would be your dexamethasone. So these are just strategies for adrenal crisis prevention. Masyadong maliit, ano? Oops. So here you have to delineate between what temperature level the patient is at. Kung more than 38 lang or more than 39 degrees, because this will dictate to us how high your corticosteroid dose will be. So pagka more than 38 lang, the dose that you give would be double their oral cortisone dose until recovery. So you just double the dose that they are taking if they are in a state of infection, tapos 38, more than 38 lang. But if it is more than 39 degrees, then what is recommended is triple the corticosteroid dose until recovery, and then gradually decrease to the baseline dose in 2 days. For severe infection requiring admission and intensive care, you have to give the patient parenteral or subcutaneous hydrocortisone administered at 50 to 100 milligrams every 6 to 12 hours until recovery. For major operation, then almost the same dose, pero mga 100 milligrams during the induction, and then followed by 50 to 100 milligrams every 6 to or 12 hours. Minor surgery or major dental surgery, patient should be given 100 milligrams of hydrocortisone during induction of anesthesia. During labor, 100 pa rin, no? Milligrams. When there is significant emotional stress, such as emotional stress nito, death of a loved one, or the anticipation of a significant upcoming examination, may mga naka-steroid pa sa inyo. Kasi next week, exam na. Baka kailangan ano kayo? 10 to 20 milligrams. So, just joking about going prolonged intensive strenuous activity, dental procedures. It's only during minor procedures where no dose adjustment is needed from their baseline corticosteroid dose. So kung ang pasyente mo is already taking in steroids, and they have these stressors, then you have to adjust their doses as a stress dose para ma-prevent ang adrenal crisis. Okay, so we'll leave the hypofunction and go to hyperfunction, the adrenals. So part pa rin ng hyperfunction would be your congenital adrenal hyperplasia. So it's either hypo or hyper, pwedeng congenital adrenal hyperplasia. And also the manifestation of Cushing's syndrome. So you may have excess androgen, that is what we see in congenital adrenal hyperplasia. So in this case, there will be virilism in female babies. Excess cortisol, different causes. Excess mineralocorticoid, maybe primary hyperaldosteronism or an aldosterone secreting adenoma, and even congenital adrenal hyperplasia, or excess estrogen, usually due to a tumor. So diagnosis and treatment, so most of the congenital adrenal hyperplasia would have genetic mutation, as you see. There are chromosomal abnormalities, and the signs and symptoms would be dependent upon what the deficiency or excess that they would have in these patients. So probably this is a basic slide, and this is in Nelson, and you can look at this in your textbook better, I think. Also this slide, diagnosis and treatment of congenital adrenal hyperplasia. You can examine it more closely as you read. So puro mga congenital or genetic mutation. Cushing's syndrome. So this is a rare endocrine disorder, and the incidence is approximately 13 million people annually, but most commonly due to exogenous intake of your glucocorticoid. It is also known as your hypercorticolism. So we have two forms. Either the Cushing syndrome is due to an exogenous cause, or it is endogenous Cushing's. So exogenous, which is the most common. And this is mainly due to the long-term administration of cortisol, like drugs, to treat medical conditions like arthritis, bronchial asthma, COPD, malignancy, leukemia, and even in pregnancy who are having problems like APAS, they are on chronic steroids. And for the endogenous cause, 70% from of results from Cushing's disease would be due to benign pituitary adenoma. So 10 to 15% non-pituitary tumors. This would be the ectopic ACTH syndrome, and this would include benign or malignant tumors, mostly in the chest or abdomen, and another 10 to 15% benign or malignant tumors of the adrenal glands. So we mentioned earlier the importance of the principle of insulin resistance, that is an important factor in the evolution of Cushing's. Because of this, you have hyperglycemia, you have truncal obesity, and bone dysfunction. That would lead to your diabetes mellitus type 2. So most of these patients would have hypertension. In 85% of cases, hypertension would be prominent. They would have hyperglycemia, type 2 diabetes, impaired immune system. They would have stunting in children, or short stature. That would be part of the manifestations of Cushing's. Diagnosis-wise, since the most common is exogenous Cushing syndrome, then the history of intake of exogenous steroids would be very, very important. And the PE findings suggestive of Cushing's syndrome, like your moon phases, your buffalo hump, your stria, your central obesity. So you would probably picture parang anasarcos patient, but they are not edematous in that sense. A Cushing's syndrome patient or fasces would be, say, moon fasces, big trunk. But if you look at the extremities, they are thin. That's why in patients with nephrotic syndrome, sabi natin nun, in nephrotic syndrome, patients would manifest with edema. But the edema also involves the extremities. Malaki ang chest, malaki ang trunk, meron siyang facial edema, just like parang moon fasces. But in Cushing syndrome, the extremities are thin. So outright, you will be able to recognize these patients. The late-night cortisol level in blood and saliva would have to be tested in these patients. They would have low dose or undergo low dose dexamethasone suppression test or dexamethasone corticotropin releasing hormone test for the diagnosis. So treatment-wise, for Cushing's, if this is an exogenous condition, induced condition, then the gradual tapering of the steroid is very, very important. We always mention tapering of steroid in any of the subspecialties. Probably you've heard this. But in truth, we have different ways of tapering the steroid. Pero ang commonality is the gradual decrease in the dose on either a daily intake or a weekly intake. So as in nephrology, we usually would decrease the intake of steroid while tapering on a weekly basis. Kaya medyo mas matagal ang pagbaba. So for pituitary tumors, then surgery may be performed. There may be radiation therapy, which may be done for a minimum of 6 weeks. Or stereostatic radiosurgery. You can also do pharmacologic treatment by giving your ketoconazole, methotrexate, and of course treat the other symptoms like the hypertension and the hypoglycemia, the hyperglycemia that these patients may be having by giving your hypoglycemic agents. So for hypertension, since you may be dealing also with some form of sympathetic stimulation here, then it would be, and the renin-angiotensin, then probably one of the initial medications that this patient might receive for hypertension would be beta blockers, vasodilators, or your ACE inhibitors. Okay, so this is the algorithm, no? for uh, working up the cause for the Cushing syndrome. So the Cushing syndrome is merely a manifestation of the increased cortisol level, and we need to look into what is causing this. So you do the ACTH level, and depending upon this, you just follow the arrow. If it is less than 10, then do an MRI, a CT scan. You might be dealing with the primary adrenal condition like adenoma or a hyperplasia. If this is more than 20, then subsequently you might be dealing with a patient who uh, may have an adenoma again, but it may be an ectopic tumor, ACTH, or ano to? Ayun, si adenomas, ng mga adenomas dyan. Or it may be secondary to an exogenous steroid intake. So the following would be merely a picture of patients with Cushing syndrome, and this is what I was telling you: moon fascies, the buffalo hump, the truncal obesity, the hyperpigmentation, the stria formation, and these are permanent condition. Yeah, more severe form of stria. Okay. So that's for the functioning adrenals. We go to the last topic for the day. We have pubertal disorders. So, incomplete partial precocious development. So it should premature telarc. No? You have a patient here who has premature development of the breast, and so this is more common in pubertal disorder in girls that occurs development before age of 8 without any other signs of pubertal development. So aside from the breast development, it may be asymmetrical in the picture that we have. This is asymmetrical, but it can also be symmetrical. But aside from that, there is no other pubertal development. So let's say the patient is 7 years old, 6 years old, all the other PE findings would be consistent for a 6 or 7 years old. So it's mostly idiopathic and it is benign. There is no laboratory test if you are able to document that there is no other development happening in this patient. We do not need to do any laboratory test nor do any treatment. So you need just to reassure that this is probably a parang normal variant lang of what is happening. The premature telarc or early breast development that is happening here is secondary to the unsuppressed hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis early on. And there is an increased sensitivity of the breast tissue that has caused the premature telarc. And again, no significant changes to other organ systems. So premature pubarc and the adrenarche. So by definition, adrenarche would be the progressive maturation of the adrenal cortex that becomes manifest after 5 years of age, associated with an increased serum dehydroxyandrosterone sulfate level. Puberty would be the physical manifestations of adrenarche. So this is characterized by the development of your secondary sexual characteristics. And premature puberty develops before age 8 years and 9 years of age for boys. Which is not a common, which is the most common cause in premature elevation of your DHEAS levels. Premature adrenarche is considered to be a variant of normal development. So premature menarche. So this happens late pubertal. This is supposed to be a late pubertal event, your menstrual period. So average age of 12.4 years and follows an average of 2.5 years after the breast development. So if you remember your adolescent lectures with regards to pubertal changes, this is one of the predictable patterns in puberty in females. Probably all the females you can attest na nagkaroon muna ng breast development before menstruation.